A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. You know, I was looking at a job board the other day. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. But I noticed something wild. 18 months ago, if you wanted to work in automation, you were looking for Zapier Expert or BPC Consultant. Today, the titles look like something out of a sci-fi novel. Agentic Orchestrator, Cognitive Architect, AI Workflow Engineer. The ground isn't just shifting, it's being completely replaced by a different kind of soil. It's like we went from needing plumbers to needing urban planners for digital cities.
Herman Poppleberry here, and you are hitting on the exact pulse of the industry right now, Corn. We are witnessing the great bifurcation of the automation world. It is no longer just about connecting point A to point B with a digital pipe. We're moving into an era where the pipe itself has a brain. Today's prompt from Daniel is about this exact transformation, the career landscape of workflow automation in an agentic world. And full disclosure for the listeners, today's deep dive is actually being powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash.
Well, hopefully. Gemini knows its way around a logic tree because Daniel's asking some heavy hitters here. He wants to know how we got from static, if this then that rules to these autonomous digital employees. And more importantly, how people are actually making a living building this stuff in 2026. Because let's be honest, Herman, most people still think AI agent means a chatbot that apologizes for not being able to find your pizza delivery. They think it's just a text box that's been given a personality, but it's so much deeper than the UI.
That is the biggest hurdle to understanding this space. People conflate chatbot with agentic workflow. A chatbot is an interface, it's the front porch. An agentic workflow is the entire foundation and the electrical grid. It's the difference between the waiter at the restaurant and the entire automated supply chain that gets the ingredients to the kitchen, manages the oven temperature based on humidity, and predicts when the dishwasher is going to break. We are talking about workflows that, in many cases, never even see a human user unless something goes sideways. If the system is working perfectly, the human doesn't even know the agent exists.
Right, the invisible AI, the stuff happening in the dark. But before we get into the fancy new agent frameworks like LangGraph or Crew AI, we have to look at the before times. How did companies actually build this stuff before the LLM explosion? Because businesses have been automating since the 70s. It wasn't all magic and non-deterministic reasoning back then. It was mostly just very expensive spreadsheets talking to other very expensive spreadsheets.
It was rigid, Corn, it was fragile. Traditional workflow development, whether you were using legacy, business process management, BPM tools, or modern no-code platforms like Zapier and Make, relied on what we call deterministic logic. You basically drew a map. If the customer's credit score is above 700, go to step 2. If it's below, go to step 3. It worked perfectly as long as the data was clean and the world didn't change. It was a train on a track. If there was a branch on the track, the train crashed.
But the world always changes. That's the problem. I remember helping a friend with a Zapier flow a few years back for a real estate business. One API changed a single field name from user-id to customer-id, and the whole thing just died. It didn't know how to adapt. It didn't have the common sense to realize those two things were the same. It just sat there throwing errors until a human went in and changed the label. That's hundreds of dollars in lost leads just because of a naming convention change.
That is the fragility gap. In the traditional model, the human has to anticipate every single edge case. You are the brain, the software is just the hands. If you didn't program a specific branch for a specific problem, the hands just stop moving. And this created a massive industry for integration specialists whose entire job was just maintenance, fixing those broken pipes when the wind blew the wrong way. It was a reactive career. You waited for things to break, then you patched them.
So now we have the agentic shift. Instead of giving the software a map, we're giving it a compass and a destination. Daniel mentioned that the workflow is now defined by a goal rather than a path. Walk me through that. If I'm a developer at a bank and I'm moving from a legacy logic tree to an agentic workflow, what does that actually look like on Tuesday morning? Is the code actually different, or is it just the way we talk about it?
Oh, the code is fundamentally different, because you're no longer writing if-then statements. You're writing system instructions and tool definitions. It looks like a move toward reasoning engines. Let's take fraud detection as a case study. In the old way, you have a set of rules. Is the transaction over $5,000? Is it from a new IP address? If yes, flag it. But scammers are smart. They stay just under those thresholds. They use VPNs. A rule-based system is a fence with holes in it.
Investigate the context. That's the key phrase, isn't it? Because a rule can't investigate, it can only check. If I tell a rule to check for a red hat, and the person is wearing a maroon beanie, the rule says, no red hat here.
Precisely. The agent can actually use tools. It sees a suspicious transaction, and instead of just flagging it based on a number, it autonomously decides to check the user's recent social media logins, or it pings a secondary database to see if that specific merchant has had a recent data breach. It's making decisions about which tool to use next based on the information it just found. That is non-deterministic. You don't know exactly which path it will take, but you trust it to reach the goal. It might decide to call an external API, search a PDF of company policy, and then send a Slack message, all without you telling it that specific sequence.
That sounds terrifying for a compliance officer. We don't know how it got there, but it found the bad guy. How do you manage state in a world where the path isn't fixed? In a traditional workflow, state is easy. You're at step 4 of 10. You can see the little green check mark on the progress bar. In an agentic loop where the agent might go from step 1 to step 5, back to step 2, and then decide to create a step 6 on the fly. How does the system keep track of what's happening without losing its mind?
This is where frameworks like LongGraph are changing the game. In the early days of LLM apps back in 2023 and 2024, we had simple chains. You'd just chain one prompt to another, but chains are still linear. They're just fancy pipes that can handle text. LangGraph and Microsoft's AutoGen introduced cyclic graphs. This allows the agent to loop back, to self-correct, and to maintain a global state that evolves as the agent learns more about the task. Think of it as a shared whiteboard. Every time the agent takes an action, it writes what it learned on the whiteboard. The next time it needs to make a decision, it looks at that whiteboard first.
So it's not just a series of isolated events. It has a memory of the current task. But how does that work in practice? If the agent is trying to book a flight and the credit card fails, does it just keep trying the same card until the API blocks it? Or can it reason its way to asking the human for a different card?
That's the self-correction loop. In a cyclic graph, you can define a node called error handler. If the credit card node returns an error, the agent doesn't just stop. It looks at the error, realizes it's a decline message, and moves to a node that sends an email to the user saying, "Hey, this card didn't work. Do you have another?" The development process shifts from coding the path to coding the constraints. You define the boundaries of what the agent is allowed to do, like don't spend more than 500s, and then you give it the autonomy to navigate within those walls.
It's like moving from being a train conductor to being a park ranger. You aren't driving the engine, you're just making sure nobody falls off the cliff and that everyone stays within the park boundaries. Which brings us to the human in the loop aspect. Daniel noted that humans are shifting from doers to approvers. Is that actually happening? Or is that just what we tell the people whose jobs are being automated to make them feel better?
It is a functional necessity because of the hallucination risk and the action risk. If an agent is managing a supply chain and decides to reroute 10,000 units of product because it misinterpreted a weather report or a satirical news article, that's a $1 million mistake. In an agentic architecture, we build checkpoints. The agent does the research, drafts the rerouting plan, gathers the quotes from the shipping companies, and then it literally pauses. It sends a notification to a human manager that says, "I have optimized the route based on the incoming hurricane. Here is the plan. Do you sign off?" The human isn't doing the legwork, the research, and the boring data entry, but they are providing the moral and financial authority to execute.
Signature as a service. I like that. But what happens when the human gets lazy? If I'm a manager and I get 50 approval required notifications a day, I'm just going to click approve all. Doesn't that just move the point of failure from the machine to human fatigue?
That's a massive risk, and it's why UX for AI is becoming its own discipline. A good agentic workflow doesn't just ask for approval, it provides a justification summary. It says, I chose route B because it's 12% cheaper and avoids the storm, even though it takes 2 days longer. Here is the source for the storm data. It makes the human's job as easy as possible to verify. If you make the human dig for the reason, they'll stop checking. If you present the reasoning clearly, you maintain the safety net.
I can see how that changes the skill set. If you're a workflow builder today, you can't just be good at connecting APIs. You have to understand the cognitive architecture. You have to be able to map out how an agent should think. That feels more like psychology or philosophy than computer science sometimes. You're basically designing a personality that is optimized for a specific corporate task.
It really is. You're designing the inner monologue of the machine. If you're looking to build a career in this in 2026, the first thing you need to master isn't just Python. Though Python is still the king of the jungle here, it's orchestration logic. How do you break a complex business goal into subtasks that an agent can actually handle? Because if you just give an LLM a huge, vague goal like increase our Q3 revenue, it will get lost in the woods. You have to design the chain of thought. You have to tell it, first, analyze the sales data. Second, identify 3 underperforming regions. Third, draft a localized marketing plan for those regions.
And let's talk about the data architecture side of this. Everyone talks about RAG retrieval, augmented generation like it's this magic wand. You just point the AI at a folder of documents and suddenly it's an expert. But if your company's internal documentation is a mess of outdated PDFs, contradictory spreadsheets, and Slack screenshots, your agent is going to be a very fast, very confident idiot. It'll be quoting the 2018 vacation policy to an employee in 2026.
The garbage in, garbage out rule has never been more punishing. To be a top-tier workflow builder now, you have to understand vector databases. You need to know how to chunk data so that the agent can find the right context at the right time. If the agent is trying to solve a customer billing issue, it needs the specific billing policy from 2026, not the one from 2022. Managing that context window is a high-level skill. You're essentially acting as a librarian for the AI. You are curating the knowledge base that the agent uses to make its decisions.
I love that. AI librarian. It sounds much more dignified than prompt engineer. Speaking of prompts, Daniel asked about the frameworks. You mentioned LangGraph and AutoGen, but what about the multi-agent stuff? I keep hearing about Crew AI. The idea of having a researcher agent and a writer agent talking to each other feels very efficient, but is it overkill for most businesses? Does a local plumbing company really need a crew of agents?
For a small mom-and-pop shop? Probably. You can usually get by with one well-tuned agent. But for enterprise-level workflows, it's the only way to scale. Crew AI is brilliant because it mimics a human team structure. You assign roles and tools to different agents. One agent is the sleuth. Its only job is to find the data. Another is the analyst. It takes the data and looks for patterns. A third is the manager. It reviews the work and decides if it's done. This prevents the single point of failure you get when one giant prompt tries to do everything. It also makes debugging much easier. If the final report is bad, you can look at the logs and see exactly which agent dropped the ball. Was the research bad, or was the analysis flawed?
It's like being a director on a movie set. You're casting the agents. You, Gemini, you're the lead actor because you're fast. You, Claude, you're the script supervisor because you're precise. And speaking of casting, let's look at the business side. Daniel wants to know who is actually buying this. We know the big tech companies are all over it, but where is the aggressive adoption happening in the real world? Who is actually writing the checks for these cognitive architects?
It's the paperwork-heavy industries, corn. Professional services are the gold mine right now. Legal and accounting firms are drowning in unstructured data. An agentic workflow can take 10,000 pages of discovery documents in a lawsuit, categorize them, flag inconsistencies, and draft a summary in the time it takes a junior associate to drink a cup of coffee. We're seeing these firms move from billable hours to value-based pricing because the hours are disappearing. If you still charge by the hour in 2026, you are going out of business.
That's a huge shift. If you're a law firm and you used to charge for 50 hours of document review, and now an agent does it in 5 minutes for the cost of a few million tokens, your business model just exploded. How do they justify their fees? Do they just say, well, the AI is very expensive?
They justify it through outcome. They aren't selling the time it took to read the documents, they are selling the win in court. And this is a crisis for some, but a massive opportunity for the workflow builders who can implement these systems. If you can show a law firm how to handle 5 times the caseload with the same staff, they will pay you almost anything. The same goes for logistics. Managing supply chains in 2026 is a nightmare of shifting variables. Port delays, fuel prices, geopolitical shifts. Traditional software can't handle the vibe of the global economy. Agentic workflows can. They can read the news, interpret a strike at a port in Rotterdam, and autonomously start rerouting shipments before the human manager even wakes up.
It's the move from reactive to proactive. Instead of the manager getting a call at 3 a.m. saying the ships are stuck, the manager wakes up to an email saying, the ships were going to be stuck, but I already moved them to Antwerp. Click here to approve the extra $2,000 in fuel costs. And that brings us to the money. Daniel asked how much people are charging for this. I saw a figure in the notes about small implementation starting at $5,000, but enterprise ecosystems going up to $300,000. Does that track with what you're seeing, Herman? Or is that just AI hype pricing that will vanish in 6 months?
It's actually quite grounded when you look at the ROI. A small implementation might be something like an agentic-led qualification system for a mid-sized real estate agency. It reads incoming emails, checks the property database, looks up the leads LinkedIn to see their job title, and decides if they are a high-value target before alerting a human. That's a $5,000 to $10,000 project because it's a contained use case with a clear dollar value. But when you talk about an agentic ecosystem for a Fortune 500 company, where you have hundreds of agents managing internal HR, IT tickets, and financial reporting, you are looking at 6- and 7-figure contracts. You are essentially building a digital department.
And are these builders usually solo consultants? Or is this being swallowed up by the big MSBs, the managed service providers? I can imagine Accenture or Deloitte wanting a piece of this pie.
It's a mix, but the independent consultant is having a real moment right now, much like the early days of web development. Large IT firms are often too slow to adapt to the weekly changes in LLM frameworks. If a new version of LangChain drops on Thursday that makes a previous architecture obsolete, a solo AI architect can pivot by Friday morning. The big firms take 6 months to clear a new tool through compliance and training. So, we're seeing a lot of fractional AI officer specialists who work for 4 or 5 companies at once, maintaining their agentic digital workforce. They aren't employees, they're more like high-end mechanics for the company's brain.
Fractional AI officer. I need to update my LinkedIn. It sounds like the kind of job where you work from a beach, but you have to be ready to jump on a call if the researcher agent starts hallucinating that the company was founded by a cat. But what about the retainer model? Daniel mentioned builders charging $2,000 to $10,000 a month for automation as a service. That sounds like a dream recurring revenue for keeping the robots running. Is there really that much maintenance?
It's necessary because these systems aren't set it and forget it. This isn't like a legacy SQL database that just sits there. Models get updated, APIs break, and prompt drift is a real thing. An agent that worked perfectly in January might start getting lazy or weird in April because the underlying model was tweaked by the provider. We call this model degradation. You need a human expert on a retainer to constantly tune the cognitive architecture. You have to run regular evals evaluations to make sure the agent is still hitting its accuracy benchmarks. It's basically digital talent management. You aren't maintaining software, you're coaching a workforce.
I think that's the most profound takeaway here. From building pipes to managing talent, it's a complete shift in identity for the IT guy. You're no longer the person who fixes the printer or resets the password. You're the person who manages the silicon-based employees. You're a manager of intelligence. Does that require a different kind of personality? Do you need to be more managerial and less coder?
You need both. You need the technical chops to understand why a Python script is failing, but you also need the empathy to understand why a human employee is frustrated with the AI's output. If you're a listener looking to break in, don't get intimidated by the AI label. You don't need a PhD in mathematics. You don't need to know how to build a transformer from scratch. You need a deep understanding of business logic and the ability to translate that into agentic instructions. The translation layer between human needs and machine execution is where the wealth is being created.
It's the empathy gap. The machine doesn't know why. A business process matters. It doesn't know that if the payroll agent is late by 2 hours, 500 people might miss their rent. It only knows what the goal is. The human builder is the one who provides the why and the urgency, which actually makes this a very human career path, ironically enough. We are using our most human traits, judgment, ethics, and context, to guide the machines.
That is the beautiful paradox of 2026. The more we automate the doing, the more valuable the thinking and the overseeing become. We are moving toward a world where your career capital is defined by how well you can orchestrate the intelligence of others, whether they are made of carbon or silicon. If you can manage a team of 20 AI agents that do the work of 100 people, you are worth more than 100 people.
Well, I for one welcome our new silicon colleagues, as long as they don't start asking for coffee breaks or complaining about the office temperature. But before we wrap this up, I want to talk about the low-code side of this. Daniel mentioned Aiton and Make.com. A lot of developers look down their noses at those tools, calling them toys, but they pivoted hard toward AI. Can you actually build enterprise-grade agentic workflows in a drag-and-drop interface? Or do you eventually hit a wall where you have to write real code?
You can get 80% of the way there with low code, and for many businesses, that's enough. And 810 in particular has been very aggressive. They've added agentic nodes that let you drop an LLM right into the middle of a flow and give it tools like Google Search, a calculator, or a database query. It's democratization in action. It allows a business analyst, someone who knows the company's pain points but isn't a Python pro to build a functional agent. Now, the last mile. The security, the complex state management, the custom integrations, that still requires the pro code frameworks like LangGraph, but the barrier to entry has never been lower. You can build a prototype in an afternoon that would have taken a team of developers months to build 2 years ago.
So the advice to Daniel, and to everyone listening, is to treat the toolbox like a living thing. Learn the frameworks, play with the low-code tools, but don't get married to one. Because, in this space, today's industry standard is tomorrow's legacy tech. You have to be a continuous learner. If you stop reading the research papers for 3 weeks, you're already behind.
Precisely. Flexibility is the only true job security in 2026. If you can adapt your logic to the next model, whether it's GPT-6 or a new open source giant, you will always be in demand. The tools will change, but the need for logical orchestration is permanent.
Well, on that note, I think we've given the agentic orchestrators of the future plenty to chew on. This has been a fascinating look at how the invisible workflows are basically the new infrastructure of the global economy. It's not just about efficiency anymore. It's about creating systems that can think and adapt alongside us.
It's been a blast. We're really just at the starting line of this. And a huge thanks to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping our own workflows running smoothly, even the ones that aren't agentic yet.
And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show and the generation of this very script. Without that compute, we'd just be two guys talking to a wall.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you found this dive into the future of work useful, we'd love it if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. It really helps the algorithm find more humans, and maybe a few agents, to join our community and keep the conversation going.
Find us at myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and links to the frameworks we discussed today, including some starter templates for LangGraph and Crew AI. Until next time, keep your prompts sharp and your agents honest.
See you next time. Stay curious.
This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show. My weird prompts where our thoughts go from slow takes